With me now is Markos Moulitsas. He's founder and publisher of the Daily Kos, the liberal blog that first organized the conference that became Netroots Nation. So I guess whether you like this or not, you're the godfather of this conference. Markos, good to see you, sir. Welcome. Welcome to the show.
Pleasure to be on, Chuck. Pleasure to be on.
Let's start with what are progressives looking for this year? You know, when you first started this blog in '07, I feel like you were looking for a progressive that would at least make promises you want to hear. It sounds like this year you're looking for progressives that actually have a progressive record rather than rhetoric. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. I mean, right now we're pretty heavily focused on 2018. I mean, the country has a real choice at stake here, whether you're going to support a president who is a traitor to our country and a party that backs up that treason, or do you want a party that actually puts Americans and America first? So there's that. But that said, I think it's also important to note that we are watching our potential 2020 field very carefully. And we're going to judge them in large part on how strongly they were with the resistance from day one through the 2018 election.
So what does that mean? What does that mean for a guy like Joe Biden? Okay, in some ways, former vice president, we know he's got a reservoir, I assume, of some support because of his connection to Barack Obama. What does that mean for a guy like him with the progressive crowd?
Well, you know, I don't quite know, to be honest. I think a lot of the energy right now is with Elizabeth Warren. It's with Kamala Harris. I think those are the people that are getting a lot of attention. Joe Biden's kind of been out of the game for the last several years. And yes, you're right. He has a name recognition. He has a lot of goodwill for his service in the last administration. But that doesn't mean that he's first and foremost on the mind of the kind of activists that go to Netroots Nation, the kind of people that are the influencers as Democrats start deciding who they're going to support in 2020.
You know, there's been some interesting reactions to different issues that are popping up in this debate inside the Democratic Party. It was interesting. Our reporters picked up that Tom Steyer, who, of course, billionaire, been pushing impeachment, that his impeachment message wasn't as well received as other parts of his message. What do you make of that? Why isn't the impeachment message resonate as much with some at Netroots Nation as maybe Tom Steyer wishes it did?
Well, I'm glad it's not resonating, to be honest, because I actually don't think it's a salient or a very helpful argument heading into 2018. We don't want to put Donald Trump on the ballot. We don't want to make 2018 a presidential year. We want it to be a midterm election year in the first term of a president, which historically is already difficult for the incumbent president. And we want to focus really on how the Republican Party really is bought and paid for by Russia at this point, how they're trying to get rid of your right to choose, trying to take away your insurance, all those things that are really part of the modern Republican Party. Yeah. Once hopefully Democrats win big in 2018, in my estimation, obviously, then we can decide how to deal with Donald Trump. Always remembering that there's always Mike Pence right behind them. So it's not like...
So you believe this should be done at the ballot? It sounds like you believe this is better at the ballot box than in a committee hearing.
I actually think that Donald Trump needs to be held accountable. And I look forward to Democrats taking control and holding hearings and really getting to the root of what this White House is and what it is doing. But beyond that, 2020 is going to be the year we're going to decide which direction we really want the country to go.
All right, I want to ask you about this debate about democratic socialism. And I'm going to do so by playing you a clip today from Cynthia Nixon, who, of course, is the progressive that's challenging Andrew Cuomo for governor in New York. Here's what she said.
The establishment is terrified of that word, socialism. But if we learned one thing from the Obama years, it's that Republicans are going to call us socialists no matter what we do. So we might as well give them the real thing.
Look, this is going to be, I think this is going to be, though, a big debate point on that Democratic primary stage in 2020, isn't it?
I don't even think it's going to be a debate point. You either embrace the label and own it and be a player, or you can be like Andrew Cuomo and be off on the sidelines and irrelevant. That's where this is going. Because when you really look at what that so-called socialist platform is, and Nixon's right, they're going to accuse us of being communist. before all is said and done. When you look at it, it's basically healthcare, access to education. I mean, these are things that people actually like. If you go down item by item, people actually want these things. Donald Trump may not. He doesn't want his taxes to go up. But everybody else kind of does. So I actually want to have that debate. Let them talk about what it means to be a socialist. We're not the party that's being bought and paid for by Russia. We want to talk about the socialists. We are the party that is looking out for Americans and America.
I'm curious, messaging-wise, this fall, there's been this debate that, you talk to any Democratic campaign and they will tell you, boy, the two issues that resonate the most are actually health care and health care. In some ways, that is what's resonating on the campaign trail. And yet the national conversation is not health care, as you know. It's a bit of Russia, or it's just Trump in some form or another. Is that a problem, you think, or at the end of the day, do you think that doesn't matter, that Trump's going to be the story, so embrace it?
So healthcare absolutely is probably the item that resonates the most. That doesn't mean that Russia's irrelevant, that the right to choose is irrelevant, because it's a midterm election. Generally, these are base turnout elections. And so you want to make sure that our core Democratic voters turn out and vote. And historically, they're very difficult to turn out. Talking about African Americans, Latinos, single women, young people, some of the hardest performing demographics. So talk about the things that they care about, and they hopefully, and I believe they will, respond. And so healthcare, absolutely. It's almost front and center. But all these other issues also matter on the periphery. Guns. Talk about guns. These are issues that actually are going to matter and are going to make a difference when the votes are tallied up.
Before I let you go, is there enough room in the progressive movement for enough support for both Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders in a presidential primary, or would they cannibalize each other?
Good question, Chuck. I actually think that Elizabeth Warren takes a great number of Bernie supporters. I think she probably does the best job in bridging the sort of divide between establishment and the resistance better than anybody else. And I mean, she's my favorite, so I'll just disclose that. But I also love Kamala Harris, and I love Kirsten Gillibrand. I think we're going to have a wealth of candidates, and Bernie Sanders will have a role in that conversation. I think he wants to be a part of that conversation, but I think his moment is past, and there's sort of a future generation of Democrats that are going to be front and center.
All right. Markos Moulitsas.
And I'm going to be in trouble for that one.
Yes, you are. Markos Moulitsas, who will now go hide in Daily Kos and get yelled at by a bunch of Bernie bros in a few minutes. Anyway, Markos, thanks for coming on and sharing your views, sir. Much appreciated.
Always a pleasure.
Hello, YouTubers. If you're watching this, it means you've checked out our channel, so thank you. Now do me a favor, subscribe by clicking on that button down there. Click on any of the videos to watch the latest interviews and highlights from MTP Daily and MSNBC. You can get more Meet the Press content every morning in the First Read newsletter. If you're tired of content that you don't know anything about where it came from, you don't have to have that problem with us. NBC News, MSNBC, MTP, and the Meet the Press mindset right here for you on YouTube. Subscribe now.